Alright, what's going on everyone? Today we're talking about something that I probably never would have thought I'd talk about in a video, and that's the power level of Planeswalker decks. I actually think they are better than ever, and yet no one is talking about it. To be fair, I'm probably in a sort of unique situation where I've spent so much time working on them for these Planeswalker deck upgrade videos, so like most of the veteran players, the enfranchised players, they just haven't noticed because they don't really care about the product. But yeah, I think they have improved a lot, and I guess I will talk about them since no one else is going to. So the thing you have to realize about Planeswalker decks is, yes, they are pretty underpowered, and they are designed for newer players or returning players or casual players. They're a little bit underpowered and more designed for kitchen table play. And that actually hasn't really changed. What has changed is the filler cards, because the filler cards have been improved dramatically. You see, most Planeswalker decks are built around themes, and those themes are usually based on, the mechanics of the set. Things like Riot, or Kicker, or Historic, stuff like that. So the decks are built around these themes or mechanics, but they always contain really base level filler cards. Things like Pharaoh Maka, Thornhide Wolves, or that one bird thing that I still don't know how to pronounce. These cards are not really playable. They basically exist for the sake of draft. That's why they're in the sets, and that's why they're in the boosters, and they're also good for welcome decks because they're very simple and they make teaching the game to a new player, easier. But they really don't belong in a constructed deck. There are countless cards that are strictly better than these, and most of them are still bulk because they themselves aren't necessarily competitive, but still strictly better. And that's basically the entire point of the upgrade videos, is to show people how to, convert these really base level, not really constructed playable cards into, slightly better things. But there's always these filler cards that don't really need to be in a constructed deck. And the point is, the core 2020 decks actually change that, because the filler cards aren't really filler anymore. I mean, there are still cards that are off theme, but instead of containing these really unplayable cards, Wizards of the Coast has given us, well, kind of semi-unplayable cards. Let me give you an example. The Vivian decks from 2019 to 2020 were very similar. They used different cards, but they were both mono green stompy decks. However, the 2019 deck contained Thornhide Wolves, and let me be clear about this, you should never play Thornhide Wolves in a constructed deck. The core 2020 deck, however, contains Silverback Shaman in that same spot. And the irony is, this is basically what our upgrade slides look like. I mean, if I just put a red arrow here and there you go. That's what I do. Thornhide Wolves is not good, so why not replace it with Silverback Shaman and get Trample and a free card out of it, right? And that's how these core 2020 decks are. It's almost like the decks come pre-upgraded, because the unplayable bulk cards that should never be in a constructed deck in the first place have been replaced for things that are, kind of okay. I mean, Silverback Shaman isn't a competitive card, don't get me wrong. It's not, a great card that you want to necessarily take to a Grand Prix, but comparing it side by side with Thornhide Wolves that we got last year, it's definitely an upgrade, and that is echoed throughout all of the core 2020 decks. I mean, if you compare, for example, the Vraska Scheming Gorgon deck from Ixalan to the Sorin Vampire Bloodlord deck from core 2020, both of these are tribal vampire decks, but the Vraska deck had Queen's Bay Soldier, which is a 2/2 with no abilities, and the Sorin deck had Blood Burglar, which is basically the same thing, but it has lifelink on your turn, so it's basically another strictly better upgrade. And even worse, the Vraska deck had Gilded Sentinel, which is a 4 mana 3/3 with no abilities and not a vampire. The Sorin deck also has a non-vampire in the form of Dread Presence, but it has multiple abilities, and they are relevant to the deck's strategy because it has a life drain theme, and Dread Presence is an enabler for some of the vampires in the deck. And that's what's changed. The core 2020 decks took the worst, the lowest, worst filler cards in the decks, and they just made them a lot more relevant to the deck strategy. And again, no one's really talking about it because no one's really noticed. And that's all I wanted to say, is that the core 2020 decks have improved a lot. Don't get me wrong, they aren't challenger decks, which by the way are one of the best products on the market in my opinion, but the Planeswalker decks aren't those. They aren't as competitive, and they still need a lot of work to become more consistent and more powerful. So I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression. They are still still entry level decks, but the filler cards, those really bad filler cards, have been elevated and improved, which is really good for the people who buy those decks because they aren't getting cards that are just not even worth having. Just the decks are just much more consistent and more well-rounded and just better in general. So yeah, I don't know who is responsible for that change. I feel like whoever at Wizards of the Coast made the decision to include better cards in these decks is probably going to go relatively unrecognized, just because, like I said at the beginning of the video, enfranchised players don't even know this happened because they don't really care about the Planeswalker decks, which, you know, makes sense for them. So I feel like this was a thankless job that will go unnoticed by most people, but I have spent so much time with these decks, hours upon hours, pouring over the deck list and finding upgrades for them on a budget, and I can definitely see how much they've improved. So yeah, I doubt this video is going to be watched by anyone at Wizards of the Coast, or specifically whoever worked on these things, but on the off chance that it does, you know, your work hasn't gone completely unnoticed and it's much appreciated. I actually think this is a very positive change, even if, again, no one's really talking about it. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.